Hi, welcome to Flight Test. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be showing you how to build the FT Versa Wing. Now, if you notice I didn't say swappable, it's because this wing was designed, it was actually the third design requested by you wonderful folks, but we wanted it to truly be versatile, so although it is a swappable, it can be converted into a pusher assembly using our new FT Elements firewall. If you want to build the Versa Wing, get your plans downloaded for free on our website, or just go ahead and pick up a speed build kit, and we'll get shipped to your door, get your parts in order, and we'll get started. Now, if you don't intend to build it as a pusher, but actually go as a traditional swappable, you will need to build your power pod. There's a link below that will take you to the power pod build video because we're not going to have this. But if you're going to do the power pod version, build your power pod first because everything mounts to the power pod just like all of our other swappables. Now, if you're building the FT Versa Wing off of the speed build kit, this part here is going to be an extra step compared to your scratch building because we had to do a score cut in order to make it fit into a box that was affordable to ship. Now, to make this right, all you simply need to do put a bead of hot glue right in this crack and come back with a scrap piece of foam and smear it smooth. Once this is dry, we're going to follow up with either extreme packing tape or just simple cheap packaging tape. You can use either or in the whole build process. For this one, I'm just going to go ahead and use the packaging tape because I stole it from the shipping room. So lay this down as straight as possible. This wing can be built very loosely. You don't have to worry about getting everything to the exact tolerances. My goal is to have a plane that will fly equally well whether you're a first time builder or whether you're a pro. Our tape is down, our panels together. I've cut out the relief from the tape so we can put our spar in later on. But for this moment, we're going to go ahead and flip the wing panels up so the outer skin is showing. I've placed the extreme packing tape on only half of the wing panel on the lower outer skin. Make sure you do this on the outer skin, not the inner skin, or it'll be backwards. Now I'm going to lift these two up and I'm only going to concentrate on the very outer edge of the wingtip and getting the leading edge as perfectly square as possible. Once I have the two leading edges pushed together, I can then press down the tape. Once again, you don't need to use extreme packing tape. I know this isn't available in all countries. It's just very useful, especially if you're going to be doing combat wings or anything that's higher built. And also, if you end up when you're cutting your bevel in the next step, this won't tear and flake. If it does tear on you, go ahead and go back and just put another layer of tape on with the conventional packing tape. I'm going to simply cut off the excess. As you can see, this is a little bit longer. Do not worry about this. Now that we have our two wing panels joined together, is we're going to fold it just like we do on many of our other builds. And we're going to take a nice sharp, I like to use these simple razor blades or number 11, whatever you prefer, and we're going to cut a double bevel, just like we've done on the Baby Blender, the Bloody Wonder, the Cruiser. We'll repeat this on the other side. And while we're at this, might as well go back to the very back aileron and cut its hinge bevel as well too. You don't need to make this go into extreme angle. You need very little throw on this. About 12 degrees will make this wing fly beautifully. Our next step is to install our 9-gram servos. Now with the 9-gram servos, you do have the option to put it externally, but the problem with that is the angle and the geometry of the push rod has to bend quite extremely to fasten down onto the wing. So what I like to do is, much like the Cruiser, is pre-install these on the lower part. Now, because I intend to make this go from tractor to pusher later on in this build video, what I intend to do is I'm actually going to put it on the very top. If you look here on the build and also on the plans, we're going to have an etched line here, and this is nothing but a mirrored version of this with the right geometry so you can mount this. Reason being is when you're doing a pusher and you lose the pod, you don't want to be landing on your servo arms because there's a likelihood that if you hit some tall grass and it snags it, it could break your servo and then you have to cut it open. If you're going to do a simple tractor mount or you want to keep it on the bottom, we'll simply press through here. You're going to line up the servo so the very center of the arm is neutral, and also the servo is extended out here. If you don't have leads long enough, make sure you get extensions now because it's going to be very hard to do it in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and cut out of the top servo hole here and just simply use these etch marks as a guide because I want the push rods to go out through the top. Here we are. I've removed the labels from the 9-gram servo, and I've also sanded it with sandpaper. Now make sure when you install this that you don't install it so it overlaps away from the center core of the wing. You want to mount it so your lead flows right to the center and goes towards the center part of the wing, basically the widest portion of the wing. Once you're happy with your fit, simply put some hot glue down. And press your servo on so the arm goes straight through the middle when it's 90 degrees. Now that our servo is installed, our next step is to build our foam spar. We're simply going to go ahead, lay down a healthy bead of glue, and press this flat. Use a nice flat building board while you're doing this because it keeps everything lined up and fitting really nicely. Once this is dry, we're simply going to it's the easy thing to just kind of press in on these tabs just to make the alignment a little bit easier. Once you're ready, make sure you have plenty of glue for this step. We're going to lay a nice bead of glue on the very bottom of the spar. And we're going to press it in with the thickest end going towards the center of the wing cord. As you can see, it does not go to the wing tips. Don't worry about that. Our next step is the fun part. I'm going to leave my hand on the bottom of the wing here, and I'm going to use my forearm and my hands to slowly curl this around. Now these are 50% score cuts. I used to say crease this, but actually on this build I do like to have score cuts. If you're going to go ahead and just crease it like the old way with a popsicle stick, what I recommend doing is making sure that you crease it plenty deeply, because this is so close to the center line and all these lines are so close together, oftentimes they'll kind of mix together and we don't want that. The score cut actually gives a little bit more likelihood to bend in that proper area. So we're going to take our forearm, we're going to hold down the bottom plate, and one by one you're going to hear these pop into place. If they don't, you can help it along. There we go. I'm going to show it on this end. Just like that. Once you're happy with the form and everything bends over nice and easy, our next step is to actually lay the top of the outer skin on the floor, and we're going to do our final glue assembly this way. Now, as a reinforcement, before we fold this wing over and glue it together, what we can do is make sure you have plenty of glue in here, but we can actually put a bead of glue along each one of these score cuts. And the nice thing about that is, say you're flying for a long time, and after a lot of crashes, a lot of catches, this will start delaminating if you're not careful. You can simply take your bead of glue, go along these score cuts, and it doesn't have to be perfectly lined up or anything, because we're going to smear it down in, and just do really quick beads right along the line here. Now I'm going to go ahead and give it the bend that we established already to the best of our abilities. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And one by one, drive it down in. Just like that. If you have a friend, you can also do this with clear packaging tape, but it's a little bit more juggling because you have to hold the angle while someone else presses the tape down in. As you can see, it holds the wing shape beautifully now, and it's actually quite strong. Now we're going to focus on putting the glue on the bottom of the wing and actually keeping the top of the wing against the building table. That way you don't damage it when you fold it over and you don't have to contend with the ailerons. So our first bead of glue, and once again make sure you have plenty of glue in your hot glue gun, and also that your hot glue gun can stand 3 20+ inch long beads of glue. And the last bead of glue will be the trailing edge of the bottom of the wing. Now we're going to fold this over, and we're going to put all of our attention on making sure that the spar is touching, and that also that this is all parallel throughout the whole process, that basically the same amount of gap is shown from the very beginning here all the way to the very end. That'll ensure that your wing is nice and straight. You should have anywhere from being flush to about maybe 1/8 of an inch gap, depending on how your wing goes together. As long as both wing halves are consistent, no worries whatsoever. It's different for everyone based on the radius of the front of the leading edge. Now that you're done, you can flip it over and see what you've accomplished. You have a beautiful airfoil with a thicker air cord here, a thinner here, so everything stays proportionally the same, and it's very strong. One last step I'd like to do, because the flying wing relies so heavily on its elevons, which are ailerons and elevators put together, if you have any breakage or any fatigue in one of the ailerons, you're going to feel it throughout all of your flight. So what I like to do is, once again using a scrap piece of foam, lay a bead of hot glue down, and it doesn't have to be a thick hot bead of glue, just enough to smear in, and then we're going to actually reinforce this hinge with hot glue. Be certain that you don't leave too much extra or it will bind. Keep scraping this until it starts to ball up. Once it starts balling up, that means it's nice and thin, but also starting to dry to the point where you're pulling up the foam and it's counterproductive. Another little tip you can do is you can physically take some talcum powder and physically dab it or sprinkle it over top of this. That way in the middle of the summer, when your glue hinges get hot, it doesn't physically soften and re-stick itself. The talcum powder will keep it nice and dry. The first half of your wing panel is all complete. Your next step is to repeat the exact same process, making sure you go the exact same order, and then we'll join your two wings together. Our next wing is ready to fold over to its airfoil. Now, before we do this, we're going to want to take a special note with roughly the gap size. As I said before, the angle of the leading edge here, if it's a little bit more stout here, it'll still fly good. We built plenty of these, but it changes where the trailing edge goes. So I wanted to be able to have it in the most extreme cases, this be level. But if you get it very fluid in its flow, you're actually going to have about an 1/8 of an inch gap right here, which is totally fine between the trailing edge of the top plate and the trailing edge of the bottom plate. All I want to do is just basically take a reference and get this as close as possible on this side. I'm going to go ahead and flip this around so we can kind of keep an eye roughly on our gap. Make sure once again you have plenty of hot glue in your glue stick or in your glue gun. And we're going to go ahead, stripe down the leading edge, stripe down the spar, and a stripe down the trailing edge, all on the bottom plate. Once again, keeping the top plate against the ground, we're going to fold this around. And we're just going to get these two as similar as possible. And then press and hold. Once again, I want to stress this does not have to be exact. Now I'm just going to repeat the glue reinforcement that our friend Chad Capper taught us in earlier episodes. And once again, smear off as much as you can, make it as thin as possible. You don't need to put a thick bead of glue the whole way down. You can go 2/3 of the way down. And that way you don't have to fight the excess like I am. As you can see, now that we have our two wing panels, the first thing you probably want to do is to see how they join. They don't join very well, but that's for a reason. We want to make this so that even if there's inconsistencies, you can make it fit perfectly and very easily too. Now, we're going to actually use a new stuff that we've never done before, a new technique, sandpaper. And the coarser, probably the better. This is, I believe, 100 grit. I like anywhere from 60 to 120. Keep in mind, 60 is going to chew into the foam like crazy. 100 is nice, good grit, but whatever you can get close to this is just fine. Now, we're going to not sand this lower plate or this lower wing surface. We're going to use it as a reference line. So we're always going to be keeping our eye on this. We're going to remove the material from the top of the wing to come down to meet this. So when you lay this on the table at a 90-degree angle, everything is flush. And to do this, we're simply going to lay it on sandpaper and rock it back and forth, not putting a lot of pressure on the trailing edge, mostly on the leading. You don't have to sand too many. Oftentimes 3 or 4 swipes could do it for you. Just keep in mind that you want this at 90 degrees or a little bit acute. If you go a little bit obtuse, which is greater than 90 degrees, what will happen is then to make it right, you gotta take off this longer plate. It takes longer and it also changes the way that this tab is spaced for the power pod to go on. So simply put it down on the table, focus mostly on where the meat is, ignore the very back where it comes flush to the very end. You're good to go. We can always come back and take off more. It's better to do it that way. We're going to repeat the same process with this wing now. After you're done sanding your center section, the next step will be to sand the outer wingtip to make it 90 degrees so when your wing plates go on, you don't have any slop either. This is where if you build a little bit loose and a little bit sloppy, you don't have to worry, everything will be trued up. Same process before, using the bottom of the wing plate as a reference. And now we're going to actually trim about 1/8 of an inch with our razor blade. That way the elevons don't bind with the wingtip. Alright, both wing halves are done. Let's go ahead and see how it fits. Now keep in mind, it doesn't have to be perfect right off the bat. You can always take off more. But that actually looks wonderful. Nice and level. Now if you did sand the bottom prematurely and this is off, just go ahead and keep sanding, but sand them both equally. You don't have to worry about being exact. It's going to fly wonderful. Once we're happy with the fit of our wings, take your time and make sure you're happy. It doesn't have to be exact, but it should be close. We're going to go ahead and do a similar process that we did when we joined the two wing halves together. We're going to take some extreme packing tape or normal packaging tape, and layered on the bottom, splitting the tape 50-50 on each side. Now this comes for careful eye. We're going to slide these two wing halves together, and we're going to put all our focus on the center section here. If the leading edge or the trailing edge are just slightly off, no big worries, but this will give your tabs the right spacing and alignment. So we're going to simply slide these two together as tight as we possibly can, and pushing over, we're going to roll that tape onto the other wing surface. We don't want there to be a gap in here. If there's a gap, it's not going to be a strong wing. As you can see now, we have a nice hinge. Cut off the excess here. Now that the bottom of our wing is taped, we're simply going to fold it 90 degrees just like this. Make sure at this point that there's nothing kinking back your servo extensions. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to take this tape and I'm going to stick it on right here and right here. That'll work nicely. I'm going to go ahead and go around the perimeter of the wing here. As I said before, it's not crucial that everything lines up beautifully and perfect. You want a good strong wing, but since there'll be a piece of tape going right down the center here, it's not as critical because any mistakes, any misalignments will be covered and also aligned in the process. We're going to push the wing flat against the table, hold it flat against the table. We'll take the excess glue and smear it down, and then we're going to concentrate on making all the wing surface line up. One thing I like to do now that it's dry is put an additional bead right down the seam and then work it in, because all of your strength is going to come from where these two wings are joined. Now that the glue is dry, we're going to finish this whole process off with another strip of tape on the top of the wing. You don't have to use extreme packing tape if it's not available. Normal box tape works beautifully. I like a little bit of excess to wrap around the bottom. I'll actually just cut a little seam right down the leading edge here. Fold one side over, fold the other side over. While we're at it now, since we're going to be putting a power pod on, might as well just go ahead and cut out these reliefs for the power pod to fit on. And now that we have everything done here, we can simply go ahead and cut our relief out. Be careful not to cut into your servo leads. There we go. Now we have our two servo leads easily accessed right on the bottom here. At this point, we're going to go ahead and install our push rods on the top of the wing. Now, one reason why it's so critical to pre-center your servos before installing it is because if you turn this on and this is not right, you're going to have to try to drill a hole and go in and remove your servo, change your linkage. It's going to be a nightmare. So always make sure that this is always pre-centered before you put it on. If you're not confident, recheck it. In your hardware pack, you're going to find 2 push rods, 2 coffee stirrers, barbecue skewer, popsicle stick, and of course your firewall for your pod, which you've already built, and a zip tie, or as our favorite Swede says, our zip tie. We're going to mainly focus on our push rods and our control horns. Because this is mounted in the top, our control horns are going to go ahead and install on the top. Now, if you're going to use something like a linkage stopper, I highly recommend putting the linkage stopper in before you install it. I'm going to do that now. Now on our swappables, it's much easier to use linkage stoppers. Some people don't like them, so obviously they're not included. They are an optional item, but these are 1mm linkage stoppers for the 1mm wire. And I'm going to go ahead and simply, rather than putting them on the servo arm, because I don't want that barrel to go ahead and crease the foam, I'm going to actually install it on our control horn. And I'm going to go right in the middle here, because later on I want to do some combat with this. So I'm going to put it in the middle so I can go really extreme throws, or then also keep it minor. If I went too close to the hinge line, I wouldn't be able to get the minor throws that I want without killing my resolution. Because my servos are mounted on the top, I'm going to mount it, and I'm going to let these linkage stoppers favor towards the inside. It doesn't really make a difference because you have plenty of room to go from point A to point B, but for this one, I'm going to mount it on the inside. This also has enough room if you want to go to a 9-inch prop. You can trim this away and fit a 9-inch prop, but it's generally made for an 8-inch prop. Now before we go ahead and install our push rod, we're going to want to go ahead and take our coffee stirrers and physically cut them so you have a little bit of slop on both sides. It doesn't have to be exact, but I do recommend making them level so it looks the same. Slide these coffee stirrers on before you go ahead and put the servo on. That'll keep it a little bit easier. I'm going to go to the very top hole because that's the only one that's poking above this. There we are. You may have to whittle that out with an X-Acto knife. Now the coffee stirrer is on. I'm simply going to bow this and get it in our linkage stopper. We don't need to tighten these down until we go ahead and go through our final process and setting up our throws. So for right now, this is perfect. Now to fasten these tubes down, you can use hot glue, but I actually prefer just to simply take some simple clear tape and tape them down. That'll make a nice hard linkage where it won't let that rod bend at all. Whenever you're flying fast, the faster you go, the more resistance, the more these rods are going to want to fatigue and bend. Any bending is loss of control, and you do not want that with a wing when you only have 2 control surfaces flying your plane. We'll repeat the process on the other side. Our next step is to take our power pod. Now, as you can see, I left the landing gear on this one. This can actually, in tractor mode with a Blue Wonder, flies wonderfully. It also will take off the ground too, because the wing plates extend below the bottom surface of the wing and gives you great ability to take off the ground and acts as a keel. Works out really well. So, not sure if many people like flying off the ground with their wings, but it is a lot of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and make my connections here with my servo. My goal is to get this up in the air as quick as possible now. We're on the home stretch. So we're going to connect one into aileron, one into elevator. We have a great video on delta mixing and how to delta mix many different radios and also the science behind it if you can't get it to go correctly. It's all listed in one of our videos. We'll have that link below for you. Now we're simply going to lay this on the back. Keep in mind not to damage your servos. And we're going to push this into its tabs. There we go. Like this. While we're on the bottom, we're also going to take note with where this is in regards to the hole. Now, I didn't put a hole because this can be made into a pusher. I did not put a reference hole because I don't want to put any more extra holes in it that'll confuse people. All you simply need to do is go on the center line just behind that hole, about 1/4 of an inch, put a reference mark. From that point on, we're going to press on right through that hole, and we're going to go the width of a popsicle stick forward, and we're going to press another hole in there. That's going to be where your zip tie goes into. Now, if you're making this a pusher, you don't have to worry about this step. Now we're simply going to thread our zip tie right through the bottom and up through the top. There we go. We're going to leave a little bit of a loop on the bottom to catch our zip tie. We're going to take the supplied popsicle stick, and you can cut this down if you want, but I like to leave it so it presses down over the whole chord of the wing. Although it may not look the prettiest, it's very functional and very good. As we said before, if you're not doing the tractor system, you don't have to worry about this step. I'll simply press that down. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and flip it back over, and we're going to install our power pod. We can now take our barbecue skewer and we can pass it through the holes on the rear of the pod, through the loop that we made with our zip tie. Once you get this through, go ahead and cinch up your zip tie so it's nice and snug. You don't want to break your zip tie and you don't want to fatigue the wing. You just want to simply hold it so the tabs stay in. Now, if you're doing a super high motor setup, you may want to actually beef up and use carbon fiber or a different system from the zip tie. Definitely make sure that the pod will stay on. I even actually, on the speed build challenge, I actually physically taped my pod on because I didn't want to take any chances. Simply cut off the excess on the top. Now I'm going to remove our barbecue skewer and cut it about 3/8 of an inch or so beyond, about 1 centimeter, and we'll pass it right back in. The remainder of our barbecue skewer is going to be utilized for the front of the wing. We're going to go ahead and press this in now. Because of all this extreme packing tape, it's going to be very difficult, so go ahead and take your time and make sure you're puncturing in the right spot. Keep it down on that lower piece of foam on the very bottom. Press it in about 1 inch, and then do the same process on the other side. I'm doing things a little bit different on this one. Normally I do this step earlier, but because there's such a big gap between the firewall and the wing, we can actually put our glue down in there, physically push it in, and leave our pod in. There we go. We're going to cut this to about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 long. Rolling it back and forth with the knife does a really good job in keeping it from fraying. We're now going to just lift this up ever so slightly and put 2 drops of glue. Don't try to pump it full of glue because it'll all push out on you. And we'll slide our barbecue skewers back in with a twisting motion. There we go. We'll let that dry. Our next step will be to install the wing plates. Now the wing plates actually have a laser etched line on here. That's a reference line for you. That line is going to line up with the very bottom of your wing surface. This will give you the ability to keep both wing tips exactly the same. So we're going to go ahead and rather than apply glue here and not be sure where it goes, we're simply going to line this up so the leading edge just touches the very front, and then we're going to take that back to the very back. That should line up perfectly with the trailing edge. It doesn't have to be perfect, just try to get the very bottom of the wing surface lined up with this line. Alright, we're going to apply a bead of glue on the wingtip here. And once again, keeping focused on the reference line and the leading edge, we're simply gonna slide the wingtip into place. If you're worried about the structure of the wingtip, you can always go around and put an additional bead around it, but generally it's very strong. We're gonna repeat the same process on the other side. Look at the reference line. Line it up to the leading edge of the wing, press down firm, and you're done. Your Versa wing is virtually complete. Our last step is to power this up to establish our balance point and to also dial in our throws. Now, talking about balance, there's nothing more crucial with flying wings than proper balance. If it's too tail heavy, the wing will simply not fly well. There's no way you can control it. The pitch is going to be too great and most likely you're going to crash. On the very bottom of the wing, you're going to have two holes. The reason I did holes here was because I want a nice clear area that people can go to balance out their plane. So, as you can see, in tractor conversion with the Blue Wonder on here, it's just a touch tail heavy. We're going to use this 1000 milliamp battery. You can go all the way up to 2200 because you can slide this wherever you need, even put it internally. But we're going to slide this 2200 or this 1000 milliamp battery around until we get it to go just a little nose heavy. When in doubt, go a little bit nose heavy on flying wings. You can always deal with that with a little bit of elevator trim. That looks wonderful right there. So obviously the heavier the battery, the more you move it back. Now when you go to pusher conversion, you're going to need a lot more weight up in the front, and you may actually need to use lead weight, fishing tackle, or a GoPro in the front to balance it out properly. As long as the plane's balanced, whether it's tractor or pusher, it will not matter. It'll always need to be balanced before you ever change your configuration though. Never neglect that step. We're going to go and power this up now. And as you can see, our linkage stoppers are not dialed in. I like to go with just a touch of positive elevator. And the easiest way to do this is if you take a scrap piece of foam, even a barbecue skewer, and you lay it on the very top surface here. You can simply see where level is and then go about 1/4 of an inch up. I'm measuring the 1/4 of an inch between here and here. And lock it down. As long as you have a good starting place and they're both the same, you'll be just fine. And tighten these down. Now, as you can see, I have plenty of throw here. I only need about 12 degrees to fly smoothly, so I'm going to go ahead and dial this down, but I'm going to reserve this because I want to keep these throws agile enough so when someday when I do a pusher conversion and do combat, I want a lot of extreme throws to be able to physically loop around, do tight turns, and rolls. So I'm going to leave this alone, but ultimately what you can do is you can dial into your preference. There's no throw gauges included in this because every pilot's going to want to set up differently. 12 degrees is the perfect setup for cruising around in nice gentle stalls and characteristics. Well, friends, the plane is finished, the throws are dialed in, the CG is established, and we're ready to test fly this. Now, as you can see, we're flying this off the Blue Wonder. This is a great trainer with very gentle stall characteristics and the slow speed with the Blue Wonder. It still gives you good climb, but it flies exceptional with the Beef, the bigger motor power plant, the 1200 kV power supply that we use from Hobby King and also from Laser Toys. Wonderful performance, both tractor and pusher. We will have a supplemental video showing you how to turn this from a tractor into a pusher and also install FPV gear to make it in a great FPV wing or use it as an aerial platform, which is also fun too. This configuration as tractor works great for streamer combat, just simple taking off, landing with the landing gear, but the pusher is exceptional, subtracted from the swappable pod for things like FPV, full in contact combat, and just cutting around and having a lot of fun. I do want to sincerely thank you for watching. I want to thank you for supporting Flite Test through going to our store and also chatting it up on the forums and staying active and also friending us on Facebook. We've had a huge boom and that's all because of you guys. Thank you so much. And as always, please keep the suggestions, requests for designs coming. We listen to every one of them, and when we get enough of them, we make it happen. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and test fly this. One benefit with the tractor style is it's a lot easier to hand launch. You can hand launch it in a conventional way like you do most airplanes.